Surface report reveals an alarming rise in the Territory's problem gamblers. And a new home for the new year as the Red Centre builds to solve a long-standing social problem. Good evening, Melissa Mackay with ABC News. Christmas has come early for Woolworths, with the Northern Territory's licensing director backing the supermarket giant's bid to open a large-scale Dan Murphy's in Darwin. It was 4 years this month since the company's licence application was first lodged, a little over 3 since Labor scrapped the floor size limit that blocked the bid from getting up. It survived 2 rejections from the Liquor Commission and Appeals Tribunal, and now with more help from Labor, it's been fast-tracked through Parliament last month. The licensing director says special conditions imposed on the licence will reduce the risk of alcohol-related harm, but health groups are furious and say they're considering their next steps, as Jacqueline Breen reports.
Australia's biggest alcohol retailer must have been good this year because they're getting what they wanted for Christmas. The liquor giants won approval to set up shop here on land near Darwin Airport, in what the licensing director went to lengths to say was a gift for the whole economy. In a section of his decision labelled Economic Benefits, Philip Timney wrote, "Given the state of the NT economy as it emerges from the pandemic, a private investment of $15 million will result in a significant and positive impact on medium and small-sized businesses who are able to secure contracts for the Dan Murphy's outlet construction." The director said, in his view, developments of this nature are critical to the recovery of the Darwin and NT economy. Conditions have been imposed that the director says will reduce harm. Temporary measures brought in under the COVID emergency declaration will apply permanently to the store. They stop the sale of alcohol to anyone without a lawful place to drink, meaning people sleeping rough or residents from dry communities. Woolworths says it's voluntarily going further, upping the NT's minimum floor price by 5 cents for beer and 10 cents for wine. Critics aren't convinced by what they say was a rigged process.
This is a really good example, yet again, of corporate willful blindness.
They say they're considering their options and targeting those at the top.
The chairman for Woolworths, Gordon Cairns, and the CEO, Brad Banducci, absolutely know and understand the level of harm that this is going to cause our community.
Before the decision, Woolworths announced a review of its handling of the project in response to a growing online backlash. The company's promised construction's on pause until that's complete after the top-end wet season. Jacqueline Breen, ABC News.
There are fears tonight that Sydney is headed towards a Melbourne-style lockdown. The number of cases associated with the Northern Beaches cluster has now gone up to 28, and authorities say case numbers are likely to rise. Federal assistance has been offered to help with contact tracing, but so far authorities are unable to track the source, and alarm is setting in among locals.
Panic buying is back. People are stocking up and preparing for the worst.
If they do lock it down, it will be a bit devoed for the kids.
Authorities are appealing for residents on the Northern Beaches to stay at home this weekend to slow the spread of the virus. Manly's famous Corso was deserted. Along the beaches, the red and yellow flags have been lowered. The lifeguards sent home for their own safety.
I think there's a mixture of feelings. It's like, oh, why us? And they're annoyed. People in the sort of Avalon, Palm Beach area are a little bit nervous and a bit anxious.
Thousands of residents have been asked to get tested, regardless of whether they have symptoms or have visited affected venues.
My husband waited 4 hours yesterday at Monavale Hospital. I waited 2 hours here last night and then gave up.
So far, contact tracing has not turned up the answers authorities had hoped for.
My anxiety is that we haven't found the direct transmission route and can't be ensured that we've blocked every transmission line.
Genome testing has shown the strain has come from the United States. Health officials say it's similar to that seen in a traveller who arrived from the US on December the 1st. The spotlight has also turned to airline crews and even visitors with special exemptions.
There has been speculation that this latest outbreak has been sparked by a celebrity brought in for a film shoot. Is there any truth to that speculation that you're aware of?
Look, I apologise, I don't have any information on that.
What now has authorities concerned is the discovery that infected cases visited venues 70 kilometres south in Cronulla and 90 kilometres west in Penrith.
It does mean there's potential seeding outside of Avalon and outside of the northern beaches.
That sparked fears that in the lead up to Christmas, Sydney could be sliding towards a Melbourne-style lockdown.
If we get on top of this in the next 2 or 3 days, all of us will be able to have a much better Christmas. But if we don't get on top of it in the next few days, it could mean further restrictions down the track.
Residents right across Sydney are being urged to take extra precautions or see Christmas plans turned into disarray. Ursula Malone, ABC News, Sydney.
The NT government has declared Sydney's northern beaches a coronavirus hotspot and warned more parts of the city may soon be added to the territory's quarantine list. The government also today confirmed Chief Minister Michael Gunner has left the NT for his Queensland holiday early after months of telling Territorians to stay home. It comes as another overseas arrival tests positive to COVID-19 while in quarantine at Howard Springs. Nicholas Hines reports.
A stark reminder just a week before Christmas.
The war against COVID-19 is not over.
After almost 3 weeks of unrestricted domestic travel to the Northern Territory, late last night, a new hotspot was declared.
Anyone who is travelling from the Northern Beaches local government area, effective from 12:01 this morning, will be directed into supervised quarantine or given the option of returning to New South Wales.
The cluster in Sydney's Northern Beaches and hotspot declaration has thrown Christmas plans into disarray for many Territorians and caused confusion and concern for recent arrivals.
It all changed late last night, but it probably could have come out a bit earlier before people were getting on the flight.
It's a shame at this time of the year around Christmas when everyone wants to go home that something like this is shutting down people's ability to go away, but it's for the best.
Politicians have sent a warning to those still choosing to leave the Territory for the break.
Every Territorian that is leaving this Christmas has to go knowing full well that there might be a requirement for them to quarantine when they come back, and there will be a cost with that.
One person who is taking that gamble is Chief Minister Michael Gunner. Acting Chief Nicole Mannison today confirmed he's already left the NT 4 days earlier than he initially said he'd go on leave, and against the advice he gave Territorians months ago, which he never formally revoked.
Stay here in the Territory. You're safe here, don't go. So if you can, cancel your Christmas holiday plans, stay here in the Northern Territory.
The government says his holiday was brought forward to allow for a smooth handover before the situation in Sydney developed further.
Because we were aware that he was travelling, we were aware of the moving situation, so I am doing this job.
Michael Gunner has shown himself to be a true hypocrite. This is the same person who has for months been cautioning Territorians not to go interstate this Christmas. And the fact that he's gone away early is just one in a long string of Christmas escapes he's made from the Northern Territory when things get tough.
In 2018, Mr Gunner and his wife, ABC journalist Christy O'Brien, went on holiday the day his government revealed the NT's dire budget situation. This Christmas, if the Sydney cluster isn't contained, the Chief Minister may be one more arrival to spend time in Howard Springs when he returns. Nicholas Hines, ABC News.
One of the chinks in Australia's armour during the pandemic is international aircrew. More than a dozen South American crew members have been fined for breaching self-isolation orders in Sydney. New South Wales is tightening the rules, so pilots and cabin crew will have to stay in guarded hotels during their layovers.
The race is on to find patient zero, but they may have already left the country. Up to 3,000 international crew fly into Sydney every week, some from the world's worst COVID hotspots. So far, the crews have been told to isolate in their hotels, but they're not guarded by police, and some staff are breaking the rules.
It's the breach of the guidelines that's the problem. It's not the actual guidelines themselves, it's people unfortunately doing the wrong thing.
A LATAM crew was busted doing just that 3 weeks ago. The 13 South American crew members were supposed to stay in their hotel rooms at Mascot, But instead, they visited nearby venues. Each has been fined $1,000. While the breach isn't believed to be responsible for any local cases, the Premier fears it could have been disastrous.
It's about us shutting the door on every risk factor that we can see, and that's why from Tuesday the system will not only rely on people's goodwill and compliance, but it will literally be policed.
I think this is an important step. It's a balanced step.
The Health Minister is yet to confirm what rules might change for Australian-based pilots and cabin crew who are allowed to self-isolate at home when they return from overseas.
One of the issues that we're looking at is possibly requiring them to be tested before they go to their home.
It's been a long 8 months for our cabin crew and what they've had to put up with.
A decision is expected in the coming days. James Carmody, ABC News, Sydney.
The Prime Minister has unveiled a minor ministerial reshuffle, elevating aged care into Cabinet and giving Dan Tehan the job of repairing trade relations with China. Scott Morrison has put the emphasis on stability in the midst of a recession recovery and health crisis that's not over yet. Here's political reporter Jane Norman.
High hopes of a COVID-free Christmas derailed.
We've dealt with this before, we'll deal with it again.
Fresh outbreaks reminding us all that this pandemic isn't over.
In a time of great uncertainty, stability and consistency is very much what is needed.
Unveiling his third ministry, Scott Morrison's opted for a minimal reshuffle, triggered by the retirement of Matthias Cormann.
I won't be back.
With Simon Birmingham already in the key finance portfolio, Dan Tehan steps up into trade. A former diplomat, he'll need to draw on those skills and more to repair Australia's fraught relationship with China. Fellow Victorian Alan Tudge replaces him in education.
Helping younger Australians navigate challenges in a rapidly changing world.
Ahead of the release of the Aged Care Royal Commission's final report, the Prime Minister's elevated the portfolio into Cabinet. Health Minister Greg Hunt will take on the extra role. Richard Colbeck remains in the ministry, but with reduced responsibilities.
How many residents of aged care facilities have passed away from COVID-19?
I'll just have to look up my latest report, Chair.
The Minister copped criticism for his handling of aged care during the COVID crisis, but his leader denies it's a demotion.
This is about more focus on aged care, not less, and that's all it's about.
Assistant Ministers Jane Hume and Zedza Selja have been promoted, while two new faces join the Outer Ministry, Andrew Hastie and Amanda Stoker. So the team the Prime Minister presents to the Governor-General next week will be almost identical to the one sworn in after Scott Morrison's miracle win last year. Putting a premium on stability, save for a shock resignation or retirement, it's likely this will be the ministry he takes to the next election. Before then, he's planning on taking some time off in January with his family, this time promising to tell us when.
Can I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas?
The new year can't come soon enough. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
The rate of problem gambling in the Northern Territory has doubled in just 3 years and is now the worst in the country. That's the finding of a major report commissioned by the Gunner government 2 years ago. But the government's been sitting on the results for more than 9 months, raising questions about why it wasn't made public sooner.
Whether it's a bet on the Darwin Cup, a splash of cash at the casino, or trying one's luck on the $1 million lotto, many Territorians like to gamble, but the impact of doing so is taking an increasingly serious toll.
We're now actually we have the highest rates of problem gambling risk in Australia.
A new report by the Menzies School of Health Research has revealed a significant rise in problem gambling. In 2015, around 1,200 Territorians were classified as problem gamblers. 3 years later, this had doubled to around 2,500 people.
And it's not only problems with their own gambling, their gambling will be causing harm to anywhere between 5 and 10 other people usually.
Despite spending $700,000 of taxpayers' money on the research, the government had kept the results private since March, and as late as last week, it rejected the ABC's Freedom of Information request to access the report. The Minister has acknowledged it took too long to make the report public.
Of course, I'm disappointed. I think that, 9 months for the agency to have a report is not acceptable.
The government have held this publicly paid for report for 9 months, and for the minister to only now release it after FOI and other requests just shows how desperate they are to not let any bad news get into the public domain.
The question now is what the government plans to do to deal with the growing gambling problem.
It's important that the government uses this information and develops appropriate policy that reduces harm to gamblers.
And while the government is pointing to its previous decision to reduce the cap on the number of pokies, it's yet to outline any new measures to lower the risk.
I'll continue to work with industry and particularly the community sector that provide those supports around what mechanisms we could put place.
Measures that are becoming increasingly necessary. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
The Territory's peak recreational fishing body says it's been blindsided by changes to access for much of the NT coastline due to come into effect next year. Last week, the Northern Land Council agreed to continue to allow recreational and commercial fishers permit-free access to Aboriginal tidal waters until 2022. But they've now changed their tune, saying the requirement for a permit will only be waived in certain areas until March next year. The Amateur Fishers Association says it's unhappy with the news, and the Territory Government has contacted the NLC.
What we've seen there was not in line with what we felt the agreement was that was made. So I have reached out to the Northern Land Council to have those conversations, and we've certainly been contacted by the Seafood Council and the Amateur Fishermen.
The NLC says it will continue to consult with fishing associations about access for amateur anglers beyond the March cut-off date. Tropical cyclone Yasa has killed at least 2 people in Fiji, including a 3-month-old baby. The cyclone was the highest Category 5 when it hit land last night. Fijian authorities say thousands of people are still in evacuation centres, and it's estimated the damage bill will run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Natalie Whiting reports.
In this home in Savu Savu, 6 families sheltered together, singing to keep their spirits up as the storm raged outside. Elsewhere, thousands gathered in evacuation centres as Cyclone Yasa made landfall in Fiji.
The weather changed. There was heavy rain and the wind started to get stronger. And that's when the house started to felt shaky.
That's when Sateri Wing took her 4 children to a nearby evacuation centre.
I was afraid for my kids in terms of safety.
More than 93,000 Fijians found themselves in the direct path of the storm. I can confirm as of this morning, we now have 2 fatalities.
A 3-month-old baby and a 45-year-old man have been killed, and there are warnings the number of deaths will likely rise. The Category 5 cyclone brought winds of up to 345 kilometres per hour as it tore through Fiji's second biggest island, Vanuatu. It's now been downgraded to a Category 3 cyclone as it heads towards Tonga. Fiji's Prime Minister has blamed climate change for an increase in storm severity in the region. He says recovery efforts are already starting.
Clearing roads, restoring critical infrastructure and services, re-establishing communications with severely affected areas, and coordinating support from our development partners.
But reaching the people most in need may take some time.
If you are impacted, help is on the way. Rest assured, we will reach you with relief.
Hundreds of buildings have been destroyed, but the full extent of the damage likely won't be known for days. Natalie Whiting, ABC News.
Several European leaders are self-isolating after France's president tested positive for COVID-19. In the past 10 days, Emmanuel Macron attended a number of high-level events, including a summit where other EU leaders could have been exposed to the virus. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is among those now quarantining as a precaution. Mr Macron says he'll continue to run the country remotely for the next 7 days. It's not yet known how he became infected. Importing liquid nicotine for vaping could soon be illegal unless you have a doctor's prescription. The change is designed to force those hooked on the drug to do it under medical supervision amid fears of long-term lung damage.
I was smoking between 40 and 50 cigarettes a day. I'd smoked for 18 years.
Emergency nurse Belinda Costigan is among many Australians who ditched cigarettes in favour of vaping.
I am going to be around for my children.
Every cigarette is doing you damage.
Health authorities have been waging a decades-long war on cigarettes. In Australia, shock ads, plain packaging and higher taxes have seen more people quit smoking. While some e-cigarette liquids appear benign, others contain concerning chemicals.
At a level that a very heavy vapour could approach a fatal level or could exceed a fatal level. We don't have yet a long enough term study of vapours to understand what's going to happen long term to these people.
It's already illegal to sell nicotine liquids in Australia. The health regulator now wants to ban imports unless users have a doctor's prescription.
It will reduce supply of nicotine and reduce the chances that young Australians will take up vaping.
When I do write your prescription for vaping.
Gillian Deakin is one of just 14 doctors across the country who are registered to prescribe nicotine liquids.
Smoking is one of the biggest killers in Australia. My job is to do whatever I can to get people to quit.
This is what smokers are confronted with when they buy a pack. But vapers can avoid the health warnings and a detailed list of ingredients for what they're inhaling. And while small operators are making vaping products, big tobacco companies are also muscling in.
It's absolutely clear that behind the vaping industry is old tobacco.
Now marketing to new customers, fueling fears of another generation getting hooked. Anna Henderson, ABC News, Canberra.
It's been a long time coming, but residents in the Red Centre community of Hermannsburg are celebrating the grand opening of a new suburb in their town. It started small with just 3 new houses, but locals hope even this will go some ways to solving an ongoing overcrowding crisis.
An open house day in Hermannsburg. The Housing Minister is insistent this is a taste of what's to come across the territory.
This is what remote housing in remote communities should look like moving forward.
This family are more than ready to move in. Their old house had 7 people living in 3 bedrooms.
It was a bit hard for me and my partner and 4 kids and my mum.
While most of the family moves into the new digs, Deanne's mother will stay where she is, giving more breathing space for the 6 people now sharing 4 bedrooms. It's meant for the first time some of the kids can start claiming rooms of their own.
Like they were saying, this is my room now, this is mine.
The houses have evaporative cooling that can drop the notoriously high Red Centre temperatures by 10 degrees. And holes in the wall for smaller aircons that residents can add at their own expense. The houses sit isolated in a newly subdivided area of Hermannsburg, but that's soon to change. What you can see behind me are the empty driveways and freshly paved roads of Hermannsburg's newest, still unnamed suburb. Eventually, the NT government says there'll be 26 new houses built here. That's welcome news for the residents of this remote community, who say new housing stock is needed. Urgently.
We do have a crisis in overcrowding in houses, so we want to be able to put people into new homes.
It's still early days in the rollout of new housing stock in Hermannsburg, but so far the housing reference group in this community like what they see.
This is amazing, yeah. It doesn't look more rural, it looks more mainstream, more like urban mainstream lifestyle.
High hopes for a new housing future. Oliver Gordon, ABC News, Alice Springs.
India's bowlers have hit back and given their side the upper hand over Australia on day 2 of the first test at the Adelaide Oval. The tourists were rocked by the new ball last night and then collapsed dismally when play resumed. But Australia's batsmen have also looked shaky.
Under the lights on the big stage, the leading man was left speechless when Ajinkya Rahane stumbled over his lines. With skipper Virat Kohli on his way, the new ball delivered Australia further success as India went to stumps at 6 for 233.
Oh, some shape, Hazelwood. He's got him!
It's nice to see it move a little bit tonight, and hopefully we can get it moving one way or the other tomorrow early afternoon and get a few more wickets.
Those wickets came in a procession as India's tail offered precious little resistance. The tourists lost 4 for 11 in just 25 deliveries to be all out for 244.
Oh, straight up in the air.
Australia's new opening combination bounced onto the field but was slow out of the blocks, taking almost 5 overs to break the duck.
Signs of aggression.
But there were soon bad signs for Australia. Matthew Wade trapped in front with Joe Burns following in similar fashion.
That was the plan, that was the setup.
The setup for Marnus Labuschagne worked perfectly as well, except for the dropped catch as Australia limped to the break at 2 for 35. He offered another chance early in the second session, and again the Indians failed to capitalise. They finally pouched a Steve Smith offering though. Australia's vulnerable position became dire with Travis Head offering a return catch to Ravi Ashwin before the spinner lured debutant Cameron Green into a false shot, Kohli doing the rest. India well on top with the night session still to come. Neil Cross, ABC News, Adelaide.
Now to the weather, and tonight's viewer pick, New Water Lilies, was sent in by Robert Wesley Smith. Showers and storms over the top end today, mostly sunny and warm in the south. It was 31 degrees in Darwin today, 29 in Bachelor, 34 today in Katherine, 32 in Nhulunbuy and Borroloola, 27. Alice Springs reached 37 degrees, 38 in Yulara. Point Stewart received 68 millimetres of rain in the 24 hours to 9 a.m. 62 millimetres fell in Millingimby. Throughout today, Jabiru received 25 millimetres of rain, 16 fell at Nooka. Around Australia today, 31 degrees in Brisbane and Perth, 30 the top for Sydney, 20 in Hobart. To the satellite, monsoonal thunderstorms continue across the tropical north, while an inland trough is causing isolated thunderstorms over the centre. To the synoptic, a weak tropical low has formed near Darwin. It's moving southwest, and that monsoon trough extends across the top end. Interstate tomorrow, wet in Brisbane, a top of 31 degrees, cloudy in Sydney and Canberra, sunny and 35 degrees in Perth. To our north, storms in Singapore and Manila, cloudy and 29 degrees in Jakarta and Dili. Around the Territory tomorrow, Alice Springs and Uluru headed for 40 degrees, Tennant Creek 35 and storms in Elliot. Rain further north, 31 in the top in Katherine and Borroloola, a top of 31 degrees in Nhulunbuy. And storms in the west, 29 degrees the top for Bachelor and heading for 31 degrees in Darwin tomorrow. A marine wind warning has been issued for the Beagle Bonaparte coast. There's a severe weather warning for heavy rainfall, damaging winds and high tides for people in the Tiwi, Daly, Arnhem and Carpentaria districts. A flood watch has been issued for parts of the Western Inland Northern Territory for early next week. Around Darwin, high tide will be just before 8:30 in the morning at 6.22 metres. The sun will rise tomorrow around 6:15. Looking ahead in Darwin, storms and above 30-degree temperatures for much of the week. In Alice Springs, rain on Monday and Tuesday. And if you missed any part of tonight's news, you can watch it anytime via the ABC's iView service. Just go to iview.abc.net.au, type in ABC News and select the Northern Territory. Watch your local nightly news on TV, online and mobile. And to stay up to date with the latest news from the Northern Territory, head to our website, news.abc.net.au. And that's ABC News for this Friday night. Thanks for your company. Good night.